Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Welcome back. Now, in Nigeria today, the education sector is once again at a breaking point. ASU has officially commenced another nationwide strike, and labor unions have issued a firm 4-week ultimatum to the federal government to meet those demands or face a national shutdown. Now, the question at this point is not if Nigeria's education system is under pressure. The question now is whether it's already in a full-blown crisis. Now, with us in the studio this morning is the Chairman, Trade Union Congress, Enugu State Chapter, Comrade Ben Asogwa. Good morning. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning to you and our viewers.
Now, this ASU has resumed their strike action and labor unions have given the ultimatum. How would you describe the gravity of this event in Nigeria's education system?
All right, it's really pathetic that when we talk about our education system, we've not been able to maintain stability for a long while. And if you look at the bone of contention, it has to do with an agreement reached in 2009, more than a decade ago. And that is what we are still talking about, on the implementation of agreement of 2009 in 2025. That tells you the kind level of decay we have in the sector. And when we talk about strikes in the education sector, there is nothing as bad as keeping youths away from their study area. Students in the university, you know that these are viable young ones that have the energy in them. And if you don't put them in the right track to utilize their energy positively, you know the consequence of such. And going by what is happening, we are already counting week 2 into the strike. And we are not even sure if this will be the end of it, because the same government will come up with palliative approach that will make the leaders of the labor unions and the education sector to step down their strike, maybe suspend it. And after some long while, you still see those same issues resurfacing. So if we have gotten to a point where we can hardly have a whole section free from interruption by either strike or one other issue, we are battling insecurity in some areas. You know, there are some parts of this country where education is being hampered with as a result of a breach of security, like some parts of the north and all that. Then we come back again to talk about dilapidated infrastructure in the universities. And all these things are contributing to reduction in the standard of education we have. So it is really precarious, because if you look at it, students start losing confidence in our country from their training level. Because when you go into the university to spend 4 years, 5 years or 6 years or thereabouts, and you end up spending extra 1 year or more, not because you failed any of your courses, not because you weren't forthcoming, but just because of the system. You know, it begins to build this mindset of hopelessness in the students. And we know that the consequences are enormous, and we may not know where it ends. Because when you train youths that begin to see the country or their system as a failure, even before coming out to the employment cycle, you know the implication. They will come in there and still see Nigeria as a failed system. So we are breeding danger for the future by not allowing the education sector to run smoothly. So it is already too bad, because we have all the indicative factors showing red when we assess our education system and the way it's running. So it's really bad.
All right. Now, so are you saying that the Nigeria education system is in crisis? And what are the visible signs that the educational system is actually failing?
All right, if this is a question that has direct answer. Of course, the education system is in crisis. If students could sit back at home, if they could just be stopped from continuing with their studies for a week, 2, we enter the second week, and sometimes they will go on strike and spend almost a whole year or months. A whole section may be gone because of strike. So if you start having such frequent occurrence, you know that the system is already in crisis. You don't wait until the houses are inflamed before you know that there are issues. So those issues border on both welfare of the workers, both lecturers and the non-lecturers, the academic and non-academic staff of the universities. And it doesn't seem to have been attended to adequately. Education sector is practically in crisis, because even when you look at what we map out for education, it is usually minimal. And even when they make reasonable provision, the implementation becomes an issue. In our system today, we have all the factors that show that education system is in crisis. Go to some universities, you see some courses missing because there may not be viable lecturers or teachers in those fields. In fact, I've experienced that as a postgraduate student in a particular university, and I discovered that a particular course, they didn't have a teacher for it for years. So if you have that, if you must pass that, and that course, unfortunately, is compulsory for every undergraduate student, no matter your field. You can imagine that situation. And when you face such condition, that tells you that we're into a very serious crisis. So, in fact, some sets before us then even had to pay to get somebody, to borrow somebody from somewhere to come and teach. So at a point, that could not continue. So we didn't know whether to go and plead for that course to be waived, or to also begin to source for a lecturer or teacher from somewhere else. If you face such situation, just imagine. And it obtains in most universities. If you go to some universities in Nigeria, they have dilapidated structures. Some structures are outdated. In some universities, you see a kind of a situation of overcrowding, where you come into lecture halls and see maybe students in hundreds. There is no public address system. And even when the lecturer is shouting, those at the back will not hear anything. So if you have such situation, it also tells on the standard of education. If you look at the standard of education in Nigeria, it's going down. And that is why the kind of graduates we produce are those that wait for white-collar job. Most of them, you see an engineer, somebody who graduates as an engineer in the university, maybe mechanical engineer, but he has not faced any practical thing that will expose him to the realities that he has to face as a mechanical engineer. Everything is more of theory. So we are not actually getting it right. Then look at the level of malpractice in our examination that led to even the cancellation of some results by WAEC and Co. When you begin to allow your system to deteriorate, especially in the area of education, it's always clear. It's something you cannot sweep under the carpet. You cannot use ordinary mirage approach to cover it. It's just like the health sector. If your health system is poor, life expectancy will drop. So many other factors will show. So the factors that indicate that a system is in crisis are there in the education system. Like now the university lecturers are on strike. And let me tell you one funny thing the government does. They know that these issues that they are bringing up concern both the academic staff union of universities, ASU, non-academic staff unions like SANU and other unions in the education sector. They won't tackle it holistically. They may sit down with the ASU members, negotiate palliatively, and just devise a kind of quick approach to stop the strike. As they are doing that quick approach, the lecturers will now go back to the classrooms, and the non-academic staff will go on strike because we've not attended to them. And that means continuous breakdown in the system. So why can't government sit down, look at all the issues that border on the welfare and well-being of the education community, the academic community, and do the right thing? If they handle all these things holistically, they will know that they have solved the problems. For instance, the academic staff union of universities, they are seeking for certain allowances and and the stuff. You remember when they did the extension of service? They extended it for the lecturers, the academic staff, knowing fully well that after extending it, other staff will come for it. Instead of sitting them together to negotiate at once, after they had extended it for the academic staff, They waited until the non-academic staff went on strike and started agitating before they could sit down again to negotiate with them and implement their own. That shows it's a symptom of failure.
Now, since the federal government has developed this pattern, and you said it's a palliative approach to these issues, they attend to one group and then the next group starts their own agitation. What makes this particular labor intervention going on now different from the previous episodes where we see government, they just simply wait when the tension drops, it goes back to status quo? Why is this? What makes this particular one different?
In labor movement, there is this slogan that injury to one is injury to all. We believe that if you do anything that is against a particular union or member of the union, you're already working against the whole workforce in Nigeria. That is where we see it. So when you see labor centers like NLC or TUC issuing a kind of industrial threat, maybe of a nationwide action, it is because of the synergy we have in labor movement. And based on that injury to one, injury to all model we operate with, it is clear to us that once you are not getting it well in one system, other systems will be waiting for their own chunk of that trouble. Because by the time you finish dealing with one body of industrial union, you may go over to the other. So that is why we don't allow it to escalate. So based on that, the statement made by the president of NLC is in line with our modus operandi. And I can tell you that the essence of it is to ensure that there is holistic handling of the issues. And that was why, before making the statement, he had interaction with all the labor unions within the education sector. And that is to ensure that their problems are addressed hook, line, and sinker. At least you handle it from point to point and ensure that every part is touched, so that we won't come back tomorrow to begin to discuss it further. And again, if I were in the side of government, I would have stopped most of these things by taking action before you begin to complain. If you get back to your house and you have children, you should know when your children are hungry. You don't wait until they all start crying. A good mother doesn't wait until every child in his house starts crying before she will know that they are hungry. When it's time for them to take morning meal, she will prepare morning meal and give to them. In the afternoon, she won't wait for them to cry. When they come back from school, she will not wait until maybe Chioma sits at one corner to cry, "Mommy, I'm hungry." That is a bad mother. So, but what government does is that you will cry, they will try to flog you and shout you down. If they try and it's not working, they will rub oil on your mouth and tell the whole world that they've given you food. Not knowing that even when you do that, the child still knows that he has not eaten. You've not solved the problem. That is why I say that the actions are palliative. So what we are trying to do is to know if we can compel government to do the right thing in the education sector, so that we won't continue having this level of interruption often. And when they do all these things, and this comes back to tell on Nigerians, you'll find out that it is even the reason that private universities are costly. Because most of them will send their children to private universities where they can pay. Then those that cannot pay for private universities will now go to public universities where strike will keep students longer than necessary. So we believe quite well that it has got to a point where there should be joint action to compel government to do the right thing.
But would this action be strong enough to actually make the government do the right thing? Because even Labour, NLC, TUC, they go on strikes regularly, and it's still the same issue, the same thing with ASU. So I'm just wondering, is it going to be...
Is it doable?
Of course it's doable. The only problem, the major problem we have is that we now have government that has had hearing. Before they can even accede to the right demand, the rightful demand coming from the people, it takes a whole lot of time. And even when they respond, you will think they have responded without knowing that they have something else at the back of their mind. You are very right, because we've had series of demands as organized labor in Nigeria, and in most cases they will swindle us, just like what happened in the petroleum sector, where they told us that the Port Harcourt refinery was working. We went there and saw the refinery working, but by the time we left, they removed whatever they kept, they put there that made it to start working, and went back to square one. So even as we talk, we know quite well that they are deceptive in their approach. We're not ignorant of that. But we must do the needful. We must continue to push, because keeping quiet will worsen the situation. If we should not believe that they don't respond well, we should keep quiet. Some people keep blaming us. They don't even know that as a pressure group, we're not holding the red beak. We're not the president of Nigeria. Neither are we the governors. They are the ones that have the approval powers. So what we do is to push them to do the right thing. So even if you push and that person tells you, I have approved, see it. And by the time you are going out, rejoicing that he has approved, he will recall the same thing he approved. I remember what happened to me at my early stage of labor leadership. I went for one worker's demand, and one of the government officials there, in my presence when I was now insisting, she found out that I wasn't budging, and she signed that request and said, deal. She wrote deal and now sign. And then came under it, I wrote approved to deal. I didn't understand the administrative implication of what she said. I came out and told my people, she has approved it. I didn't know that deal is different from approval. She didn't tell those people, she didn't direct the accountant to pay. She only said they should deal. So what they did was that they brought those things, calculated the whole thing, and kept it. After waiting for some while, those people ran back to me and said, you told us that this thing has been approved, and we could not see anything. By the time I got there, the authority that was there said, but you were there when I signed it. It was later on that I used indirect approach to find out that that thing she wrote wasn't actually an approval for them to pay. So I now ran back to her with anger. I was like, so you deceived me. She now started laughing and said, since you are labor leader, you are not an administrator now. So I had to go back and start learning some of these administrative languages. Because you may come in and somebody will write KIV. And you think you have something. You may not know that it's just, they say, keep it view. You may keep it for 10 years. So sometimes they deceive us with some kind of abracadabra in the system. But that doesn't mean that we won't keep pushing. We believe quite well that our synergy and our action will always compel them to at least do certain things, even unwillingly. But the worst thing we can do is to fold our hands. You can imagine what would have happened if we were not pushing.
All right. Before I ask the major question I want you to answer, I want you to comment on the recent decision of the federal government concerning mathematics. You know, they said it was no longer compulsory, and at some point they said, okay, it is now compulsory for every student. So I want you to comment on the impact of government decisions in, some educational policies.
That is why I said that it is symptoms that will tell you that the system is in crisis. It is not fire. It is not when you see it on fire. When you see haphazard decisions and decisions that cannot tally with the ideal, you know that the system is sick. If a minister, if the custodian of education in the country could come out to say that mathematics is no longer compulsory for those non-science students, they can tell you the level of confusion they already have. So it means that they don't even understand why the system is the way it is. Otherwise, he would have known, as a minister, at least he would have known. He should have known that the mathematics there doesn't just mean for that mathematics. It doesn't just mean the kind of mathematics you solve when you want to do engineering work. But as a student in secondary school, you must understand the basic calculations. Even if you are to become a marketer, you must understand the basic calculations for you to know how to put one or two together. And mathematics is not only for the normal arithmetics, it's also to sharpen the brain for fast thinking on combination of factors. So if they did understand that, they wouldn't have come up with such planning, statement, because it's a statement against education. It's a statement meant to water down the standard. So you don't want to tell us that those that are into arts do not need. So okay, why do those in science need English?
Right.
Maybe they should have removed English language to tell us that if you are studying medicine, you don't need English. All you need to know is how to prescribe drugs and inject. Is it? Should it be that way? They should have also told engineers that they don't need English. What they need is engineering techniques. So they really, those our leaders do not even understand the system as much, because if they do, there are certain things they should not be doing. Like that, such statement, such a plan is really so bad. Even when you look at so many policies they are bringing up, like coming up to say before you go into the university you must be at social age. They've even forgotten that we are into a kind of jet age where children are becoming smarter even at younger age. So you cannot be increasing age even when life expectancy is going down. So when they marshal out policies and programs, men looking at their programs, you will know that they are confused. Because it's only a confused person that will be working against the system that is meant to salvage. So I believe quite well that it wasn't a good idea in the first place. It wasn't a good policy. And they didn't think well, they didn't do necessary consultations before coming out to make such a statement.
All right, now let's take a look at the educational budgets. Can you, assess the 7 to 8% budget? Do you think the government has done enough? Is this sufficient?
It is absolutely insufficient. It is quite insufficient. But there is one thing that bothers me about even our budgets in Nigeria. I've come to discover that it's not even a matter of budget but willingness. Sometimes even when they budget enough, you will end up seeing nothing. So, but the first thing is to make the requisite provisions. If you look at 7 to 8% of the budget, how far do you think it can go? In a growing system where we have high rise of youth population, you know the number of young ones that are students that apply for admission into our tertiary institutions yearly, and by implication, you have to understand that even the budgetary provisions has to be higher, not what we are seeing today, because 7 to 8% is grossly insufficient. But the problem we also have is that even the provisions they make, it's only in Nigeria that they will have a project of 2 million naira and they will use 20 million to run programs and run meetings and conferences for a project of 2 million, and they will retire 20 million. So sometimes even the ones they provided will not be maximized in terms of utilization, because you see a whole lot of feet being diverted as a result of corruption. So for me, I know that such budget is too poor, but the most important aspect, because a market woman out there doesn't know the amount you are budgeting, what the person is looking at is what you can do. So even the budget we've made so far, we've never justified it on the table of competence and performance, because we've not really improved even in line with the provisions made. Let alone, and then we consider what happens when the provision is not sufficient. So even 10% is not enough for education sector. That is just the truth. Though they can tell you that every other sector in Nigeria has insufficient budget, but their own, the ones that are meant for them directly, those are our leaders, are never overlooked. Even when they make budgets, not in a reasonable percentage, but those ones that send them directly, they will implement fully. Like security, whatever, vote, or this and that, wardrobe, this one, travel, whatever for the president. None of them will be missing in the implementation.
All right. Now, what would you say is the solution to this educational inadequacies that we have in the country? And if the federal government does not respond to the 4-week deadline, what next?
All right. The first thing that we have to do is to be realistic. When you are raising hopeless youths, you are working against yourself. Because by the time you raise youths that have lost hope, they will turn violent in future, and your own life will be endangered. Even those your children you think you are training abroad cannot come back to Nigeria and live in peace. That is what our leaders should know. If they are making Nigerian youths to feel disenfranchised in so many ways, both in their education and future, if you make them hopeless, the next thing is that those your children you raised abroad, except if they are going to live there forever. Because if you hope they will still come back to Nigeria, The ones you are abandoning here, the ones you are neglecting here will make Nigeria uncomfortable for them. If we understand this, we should now sincerely face the system. Because sincerity of purpose is what will solve our problem. If our leaders can come out with sincerity of purpose, the first thing you should know, because sometimes people will be like, why are labor unions always on strike? Why won't you strike when we are collecting peanuts and somebody that is doing nothing is busy collecting trillions and billions in the name of political office? How many professors in Nigeria can drive brand new cars? I'm talking about brand new, even direct Belgium. Many of the professors cannot buy direct Belgium cars in Nigeria as lecturers, except if that person has something else. But looking at their remuneration, the salaries, it cannot afford direct Belgium cars. But look at even the least political office holders. There was a time in this stage, the councillors got brand new vehicles, but the professor cannot buy one. You can imagine such a situation. They should first of all come out sincerely to handle the education sector and other sectors in Nigeria. Because it's this sincerity of purpose that will make us to budget 1 naira and utilize it. It's the sincerity of purpose that will make us not to concentrate on ourselves and self alone. We should be sincere enough to know that if the system is not working, the failure of the system, if it didn't come on your head today, it will come on your children.
So if the federal government does not respond to this movement...
Okay, if federal government does not respond, the NSC president has already issued a threat. And the way it is done is that if they fail to do that, a congress of the leaders will be called. And definitely, you know, there is a way we work in labor movement. Labor movement is like a paramilitary or military. When you issue command as a leader, it starts. Except if you are issuing command that is contrary to the modus operandi. But once it's in line, everybody falls in. The president has issued that threat, and if federal government did not do anything after the 4 weeks, then I wouldn't want to stay here and say what will happen. But an industrial action can be declared. That is the likely step that can be taken at that point. And what you do is that when you come back, you begin to x-ray their level of actions and inaction. If they have taken necessary actions that will warrant you giving them further time to perfect it, because I can tell you for sure that the level of decay we have in the education sector, 4 weeks may not be enough to fix everything. But sincere effort will now make you understand that they are already towing the line of rebuilding. At that point, you can now allow the necessary gestational period for the education system to be reformed. But if they fail to take any of these steps that will portend better future for the education system, we may not have any other option than to start mobilizing for joint action.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Comrade Ben Asokwa. Thank you for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. We just spoke to the Chairman Trade Union Congress in Enugu State on if Nigeria's education system is in crisis. And thank you for staying with us so far. We'll go on a short break. When we return, Signature Morning continues.